Hi, my name's Dave Perry and I'm a freelance cameraman based in Ireland. I've worked on numerous TV and film projects, but you might know me from YouTube channel Wheelie Good TV.
Welcome to the Real Riders Podcast. My name's Simon Josie and this is a podcast about motorcycling and filmmaking. If this is your first time here, welcome and thanks for listening. As you heard, my guest for today's episode is Dave Perry, who I had the absolute pleasure of spending a couple of hours with late last month. As Dave is a freelance cameraman and DOP, plus runs the popular YouTube channel Wheelie Good TV, I've always thought that he would be a good match for the Real Riders podcast, and so I was delighted that we could record an interview together. You'll hear that interview shortly, and I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that my friend and friend of the pod, Simon Lewis, who is mates with Dave, put in a good word for Real Riders with Dave. Thanks for your help, Si, and I hope this episode lives up to your expectations. If you're listening to this episode the day it's published, then we are just over 3 weeks away from the inaugural Adventure Motorcycle Film Festival, which takes place on the 28th of February in Kendal in the UK's Lake District. For anyone who's still thinking about attending, unfortunately I've got bad news because the festival has sold out. Right now, in the background, we're preparing for the big day, assembling the program, preparing all the films for projection on the big screen. Just a couple of quick reminders. You can find the Real Riders podcast on Instagram, where I post, amongst other things, trailers for each new episode. And if you want to know what I've been watching recently, I occasionally post about that on Bluesky. Links for both the Instagram and Bluesky accounts can be found in the show notes. Finally, if you want to help me keep the servers running, pumping out the episodes, you can now support the podcast via Buy Me a Coffee donations. The link is in the show notes and also in my link tree, which you can find in my Instagram, Bluesky, and YouTube account profiles. Righto, let's get to my talk with Dave. Hi, Dave. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Very good. Lovely to meet you, Simon, and thanks for inviting me on. Always a pleasure.
Well, as we were talking a little bit before we pushed record, you've been a long-term target of mine, so it's great to finally get you on the show.
I'm not sure how to take that.
All done in the best possible taste. Look, I famously not so great with the small talk, so I'm going to jump in with my first question, and it's not going to be about the weather and the fact that you're in Ireland, but how did you find your way into working as a cameraman?
Wow. I'll probably take up your whole podcast with this answer. So I'm very conscious that I waffle, first of all. And I'm sure everybody who knows me from YouTube knows the same. So I'll try and keep my answers short and concise. I grew up in a household where my father was a stills photographer for a national newspaper. And he was the stills photographer for the northeast of England for 40 years. Actually, the precursor to that was my great-grandfather was also a stills photographer, the first national news photographer based in the north of England. And indeed, he even filmed the Tyne Bridge being constructed over the River Tyne back in 1927. So a long history of photography in my family. And I remember being, a young child and then obviously a teenager. And whenever the phone rang in my house, especially after 9 o'clock at night, we got a buzz, we got excited because we knew that it was a news story for Dad and he was going off somewhere. And indeed, my dad covered some of the biggest, the greatest and the grimmest stories from Lockerbie, the jumbo jet which exploded over Cumbria, the list is endless. So growing up in a household like that, I really got the bug for that buzz, especially covering news. When I was a sort of teenager, 16 years old sort of thing, my dad had often be giving me a lift into town. Well, I say town, Newcastle upon Tyne is the town I hail from. And at the time, the BBC were building new studios. And my dad always said, that's where you want to be working, son. He said, that's where the money is, television. And I'd always really fancied, as I say, getting into the industry because of the background. So I sort of set my sights on that. really. And how that happened, it's true, when you manifest something, I'm a huge believer in the power of now, manifestation and mindfulness, really. And I manifested that because my first job, actually my second job, was working in a gym. And the gym was owned by two Asian owners, and BBC, from the new studio, which radio was based in as well as television, a radio reporter came down from an Asian program called Bridge the Gap. I'll still remember the name of the program. The reporter came down from that radio program to interview the two Asian owners about the success of this gym, which I worked in. The two owners were late showing up, so I just talked for half an hour to the reporter from BBC Radio Newcastle. And so much so, I got myself an invite up to the brand new studios the following week. And off I went. And that was the beginning of my journey. And 2 years later, I was being trained as a cameraman.
At any stage, had you thought, oh, actually, I'd like to be an on-air personality? Because obviously you'd been quite comfortable speaking for half an hour to the reporter. And is that what the BBC initially eyed you up for?
No, not at all. Something happened to me in my childhood. I'm saying something happened. That sounds terrible. It's not. This was back in the early 80s when CB radios were about, okay? And my mum was always concerned that I was never able to hold a conversation. So concerned that they thought it would be a good idea, my mum and dad, to buy me a CB radio to encourage me to speak to other people. I was mad into CB radios at the time, but they were a lot of money, especially to have one sitting in your bedroom. Anyway, they deemed this a great idea. It would bring me on in terms of being comfortable speaking to people. As far as I remember, I was always happy enough talking to people, but it was enough of a concern for them to buy me a CB radio. Well, I was absolutely made up. And you know what? Full respect to me, ma'am, for calling that one, because obviously here I am today sitting, chatting away, and as I do many a time in front of camera as well now, which we'll come on to, I'm sure. But I credit the CB radio for bringing on my level of conversation right back as far as 1982. So that's where I sort of felt comfortable chatting in public. Actually, another thing we can talk about here, like I've 4 kids, I'm saying young kids, 2 of them are in their 20s now, 2 are still teenagers. And when I look at that, that it really frightens me, this, because whilst they're whiz kids on tablets and phones and everything, and, I worry greatly. I have the same concerns about my children as what my mother had about me in terms of conversation, It's a rare talent now when you see young kids able to hold a conversation face to face. I've been in the car with some of my children's friends when we pull up at a McDonald's drive-through, and it's me who has to shout across to do the ordering because they won't even speak into the speaker.
Yeah.
What's that about? But that's where we're going. That's where we're heading, folks.
Yeah.
So, sorry, what was your question again, Simon?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's a really interesting point. I mean, my youngest, he finished his last years at school here in Germany, actually, when COVID was happening. And he was, having to do classes online. And then he went off to university, and I found out that he's doing most of his lectures online as well. He goes in, he's doing sciences, so he goes in for his labs and stuff. And I don't think he has a problem talking to people, but I think he has a preference to doing stuff online,
It's just more comfortable for people.
Yeah. There will be sociological studies done about the kids from this era in years and decades to come.
100%.
Whether it's just a blip and a response from or a result of COVID, or whether it's something, much more tied up with devices, phones, tablets, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. And I certainly haven't done a lot of research on it myself, but I think it's a really interesting topic, especially to have witnessed it also in my, or at least in my younger son, for sure.
Last year, I was making a TV show, which was an incredible show in every way. It was an Irish language show, and I forget the title of the show, but it was a case study of 6 bands, music bands, coming together, who mainly formed during COVID, so bedroom bands, because they couldn't go out and rehearse and everything, but they were sort of playing the guitar and jamming online through Zoom or Skype or whatever it was when COVID was here, you know. So we followed these bands last year coming together and putting on, oh yeah, that's the name of the show. It was called On Gig More, and that's Irish for the big gig. And it was these bands putting on their first gig. What we hadn't bargained for was this, because it turned into a social experiment. So the show was all about following predominantly teenagers or younger people into putting their first big gig on. So they had to source the venue, they had to sell the tickets, they had to practice and have 20 songs off for the set list, but they had to go out on the street basically and entice people to come to the show and try and get an audience of 200 people. And to watch this happening, we hadn't bargained for this at all within the course of the program, but that took a whole new trajectory because it turned into a social experiment. And to watch, it was painful actually. So watching some of these musicians, the most talented musicians, full of talent, but unable to hold a conversation. Not all of them, of course, but there were a lot of these people, and that really frightened me because I thought that's where we're heading, you know. And then put the same people on stage to sing in front of 200 people, not a bother at all. Absolutely brilliant.
And these are people who have some obvious gifts and talents. You wonder about people who maybe don't have those gifts and talents, how they're coping with the world. And, you know, I certainly worry about that a lot.
Yeah.
At the BBC, did you go through some sort of apprenticeship or training scheme? How'd you learn your craft in the BBC?
So when, going back to the previous question, when I got my introduction to the new BBC building, they had a bar upstairs, the BBC bar. So it was a radio show. After watching the radio show being recorded, which was every Wednesday night, myself and the producer who had met in the first place down at the gym where I was working, we used to go for a few pints afterwards upstairs to the BBC bar. And I got talking to people in there, of course. And then one of the chaps was a presenter who used to frequent the BBC bar, who worked for a production company, and they were looking for a young trainee camera person. So off I went to that company. So I left the gym. I went to work for this production company for 2 years, and they trained me not just in camera, background of sound, bit of editing. It was all reel-to-reel stuff then, of course. And then just being out on shoots. But it was always the camera that I really fancied doing, especially because of my family background. And then within the space of 2 years, clearly I must have had something, you know, as my wife always says, you didn't lick it off a stone. So clearly it was in the blood, you know. So they then, weirdly, 2 years later, started hiring me out to the BBC as a freelance cameraman. I was only 20 years old at this stage. And for the BBC to be ringing them saying, can we hire Dave for a week? I mean, obviously the alarm bells went within my head as well, and thought, well, there's 2 companies here, the BBC and the production company I'm working for. They can both spot a talent that I have. I've got to capitalise on this. And then the BBC eventually said to me, look, it'll be much more beneficial for us if you'll come and work for us full time, rather than us having to check your availability. And at the time I was getting paid peanuts anyway, but I didn't care. It's all about the training and the experience. So at 21 years old, off I went to work for the BBC, and I was there for 15 years. And that was the most incredible experience. A lot of traveling, a lot of stories, a lot of experiences.
What type of projects or shows, programs were you working on predominantly, or did you have quite a sort of a broad experience with the BBC?
So mainly I worked on the nightly news programme. That's where I cut my teeth, which was called Look North. And so that was news. Fast turnaround, on the day news. Absolutely brilliant training for any cameraman. And then in later years, I got into documentaries where I can sort of specialise. I would be known here as a lighting I'm saying here in Ireland, I would be known as a lighting cameraman or a DOP now. I really locked on to the fact that I could make something look completely different with the art of lighting. So I was always going to go that way. But documentaries, really, where I had a little bit more time. So when I moved to Ireland, that's another long story. We probably shouldn't go there. When I moved to Ireland, I knew that I wanted to work on more specialised projects. I'd already been doing a lot of documentaries with the BBC and thought, yeah, this is for me. Bit more time, bit more money, so I can hire in the equipment that I need, that sort of stuff. Just a bit more specialised and really hone the look. And, well, for a cameraman, that's everything, really. You want it to look amazing. And so if I had the tools around me, which you could with documentary work. Although saying that, I still, you can take the boy out of news, but as soon as a news story breaks, to this day, I get that buzz. I really do. I get that buzz and think, only recently, I'm just going to list, not that this news story made my ears prick up, but I got that buzz of a newsman when the Beckhams released the statement recently about their family feud. I just, where can I be to capitalise on this? It was a split second. It was a split second. It was just instinct, Yeah, I got to be part of this. I got to be part of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've said recently that I got into radio because of what I thought was an interest in sound engineering, but I actually found it was the live radio, mainly around either sports or news, which was actually what really excited me. That was studio-based, so I did a lot of outside broadcasting as well. But
did you commentate then?
No. I was twiddling the knobs in the background, at whether it was test matches or all sorts of experiences. That's why I recognize your enthusiasm, because I did that job for 2 years and I just loved it because every day was different, whether it was in the studio or out of the studio, out in the field. And there's something about that energy that comes from news stories that it just keeps pushing, doesn't it? Even if you're feeling a bit flat, something happens within 5 seconds, your energy levels just jump back up again and you're running around like a headless chicken. And there's something exciting. Whether the public senses that, it doesn't really matter. I mean, as creators of working on those shows, we get a buzz just out of that energy, I think.
I totally agree. But being there on the scene of a breaking story, there's still nothing quite like it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and more often than not, it would be there'd be fatalities, and it would be grim. It would be grim, but something really weird inside you takes over, doesn't it? And I watched the way my father portrayed a news story through stills images, through newspapers. So if I was able to do that as well through the medium of television, listen, I'm not one to say I wanted to carry on the family history, but it just happened like that, And sitting back now at my age now, I think, isn't that weird how that happened, how that all worked out? But I have to say, it sounds like I'm sitting by the open fire smoking a pipe with my slippers on. I'm very much not. I'm very much still active as a working freelance cameraman, DOP.
When you were doing the news gathering, what were you shooting with in those days? What kind of camera or hardware?
Well, the funny thing is, and I'll tell anybody starting off, especially there's so many YouTubers now who go out on their motorbikes doing what I'm doing and keep the action cameras running for the entire duration or until the battery runs out, put a new battery in and then just press record for the entire trip again. So I was trained in my training before I became a fully fledged BBC cameraman. We, back in the day, were given to go and film a football match. We were given 2 400 feet daylight loads, Super 16 film. Now, a 400-foot reel, if I remember rightly, is about 5.5 minutes. So we had one reel for the first half of the football match and another reel for the second half of the football match, and you had to get all of the goals within 11 minutes worth of film, because it was so expensive. They couldn't give you any more, And if you didn't get the goals, you didn't get the next gig. So that really instilled an amazing discipline in me. You have to nearly see into the future. You have to predict when things are going to happen. You have to predict when to press record and what it is you really need. And another discipline I've learned along the way is, perhaps more importantly, you have to realize what you don't need sometimes, So that's where that came from with the whole camera thing. So I listen to a lot of people talking about the pain in the backside being the editing. And it is, if you've got 3 or 4 hours worth of footage. Of course it is. And that's just from one camera. But I nearly edit as I'm going during the day when I'm on the motorbikes making my vlogs. And I pretty much know where I'm going to be recording and where I'm not, really. And even in my TV side of things, when I'm working with a new director, now I'd never be one of these old hags who would look down on a new, younger person coming in to direct me. I've never been that because I always say in my industry, even at my age, 55 years old, I'm still learning. And the key to this is I still learn from other people, not just the craft. And I love seeing new blood coming up through the ranks. And even if they're fresh out of college, there could just be a little nugget in there which they've learned in college, which I'll take on board. And, again, I love that about the industry. You never stop learning. Every day is different as well, But I'll always tell those people that it's not what you need sometimes, it's what you don't need, and we've made some incredible things with that discipline in place.
So this just blows me away. So you were going to those football matches. Did you have like a director telling you what to shoot, or was it really up to you to pick the...
It was up to me to press start and stop.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah. But back in the days, we had massive crews. When I think about it, the expense was huge back in the day, And then, as I mentioned, I predominantly worked on news. Now, when I got my contract, if you like, at 21 years old, the reason I got that contract is I was considered I was going to be one of the new breed of cameramen coming in. They've just made the switch from film to digital. And it was high band U-matic then. I don't know if you're familiar with that format with your background.
I know the term. I've heard U-matic, and I know it's from back in the day, if that's not rude to say, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And but what that involved was a big separate box, which was the recorder with the big tape in it for the sound recorders to hold, as well as his mixer balanced on top of it and the microphone, and I would hold the camera, and we were connected by an umbilical cable, which was always an absolute nightmare because we were always tripping over each other, and the amount of times I ended up with a black camera eye, because I'd take off in search of a shot and forgetting that I was still connected to the sound recordist who might be smoking a fag or something at the time. Looking around, and it would pull the camera against me eye. So a cameraman back in those days, how to spot a cameraman in a crowd, it's the fella with the black eye. So from that, technology then became the camcorder. And it was during that time, that's when I got the gig with the BBC. I was seen as one of the new, young, sprightly young bucks who was going to go off with his own camcorder, rather, news gathering. And the chap I was working with at the time, who I was connected to an umbilical with, that sent him off to the Gulf War or something. No, not the Gulf War. This was 91. That sent him off to a war zone anyway. And I sort of started cutting my teeth in Newcastle as a news cameraman.
Do you have a fondness for film at all? Or, I mean, I'm talking the old 16mm that you were using, or it's like good riddance and you were so glad and happy to move into the videotape and then eventually the digital era?
I didn't work with film long enough. It was very much as a training routine for me. And like I mentioned, the football matches, that was all training, really. Now, I lost a couple of loads of film as well, exposing them. And it's just, it was, yeah. I know it's the art. I know people will still talk fondly of it. When I look at photographs now, though, isn't it funny how we all have the apps on our phones, and all we want to do with all of this new technology is to make the stuff look old again? Or is it just me? Because that's the first thing I do. Whenever I treat a photograph, I want to make it look like it was shot on film. even if I'm putting a photograph up on social media, it's the first thing I'll do, try and emulate film. And indeed, when I'm doing fancier stuff like tour videos on my YouTube channel, I'll always try and make it look a bit filmic and try and make it look old school and old fashioned. So I suppose that's definitely still inside me there. Yeah.
I want to ask, would you follow the same path if given the chance to do it all again in terms of your, becoming a cameraman?
Wow. I would. I think I would. So I've been a cameraman for 37 years. I've traveled the world 3 times. I've had amazing times, amazing memories, amazing stories, met incredible people. I've also moaned a lot as well. That's sometimes, well, more often than not, because of certain people that I've had to work with. But you've just got to do these things. But yes, I would. I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest.
It's funny that you say that you've moaned about some people. Isn't it amazing that, because I'm pretty sure you would have done the same thing as me, which is come across some stars, some big egos in your work. And what I always like to tell people is, I've worked with a lot of quite famous people. And you know what? You don't have to be an arsehole to be famous or to be good at what you do. And I always think of the people who were lovely people and really good at what they did. And I thought the people who were good at what they did but who were arseholes were basically, that was a failing on their part. And unfortunately, I have crossed paths with some of those people. But I always remember the ones who were very good. I'm thinking mainly a lot of sports commentators or newsreaders. Really good at what they did. Lovely people as well. You do not have to be an arsehole to be good at what you do. Has that been your experience in television as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And funny, the ones you're warned about tend to be the most genuine people. I was shooting an interview for Japanese television a few years back with a musician over here, Enya. Have you heard of Enya?
Yep.
And we went off to the Four Seasons Hotel in Dublin, big fancy 5-star hotel, on a Saturday afternoon to do this interview for Japanese television. And even, well, I can't say who, but the production company around this was saying, listen, she's a bit tricky. She's a renown for it, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, it took me sort of 45 minutes to light it. I realized as soon as she walks into the room, I can tell by her skin tones and the way the hair is and everything. Okay, to make her feel flattered with the look of this interview, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do that. So what I had in my head in terms of lighting turned out to be totally different the second she walked in the room. So it took me a bit longer to light the interview. She was totally cool. Everybody else was getting really flustered by this, not knowing that there was a reason I was doing this. She's very sallow skin, very pale skin. She would have just looked washed out and old if I'd stuck to my original lighting plan. I'd looked at recent photographs of her online just to try and get an idea of how I was going to light it. And when she walked in the room, whatever way she'd had the makeup done was just totally against the way I was going to light it. Anyway, so I showed Enya how I'd made her look on the monitor. Well, you'd think I was her best friend, and she knew. She was the only person in that room who knew what I was doing,
right,
and why I was taking so long. And so much so, at the end of the interview lasted half an hour or whatever it was. She's huge in Japan, by the way, still. She sells, I was going to say she sells, does anybody sell records anymore? But in Japan, she streams loads. But at the end of the interview, she sat and had a cup of tea with me. And you could see the dumbfounded looks on people in the room, like, what on earth is happening here? This is the woman we're all frightened of, we've all feared. But she knew exactly how I'd, treat her that day. It was for good reason, to make her look good.
Yeah.
So it's those ones, like I say, who you're told to fear the most. I mean, I have worked with some complete and utter a-holes, and they say never meet your heroes, and I'll stick to that as well. I don't want to be naming names, but
Yeah.
it has happened a couple of times, and it's such a shame. Do you remember the guy, the presenter, Noel Edmonds?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, yeah. He's got a connection to New Zealand these days. So
of course he has. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I know exactly who you mean. Yeah.
Well, I was sort of brought up on a diet of multicoloured swap shop on a Saturday before the cartoons started, which he presented probably back in the late 70s, early 80s or something. And the first time I met him was in the urinal in the BBC in Newcastle. He was there doing some filming or something. And you know, when you just sort of bump into somebody like that and without knowing you're going to meet them, that's what I mean. So we were literally stood at the urinal at BBC Newcastle, myself and Noel Edmonds. But I walked in and saw him there and I said, "Oh, how you doing?" And then I realised, my God, that's Noel Edmonds. And I said, "Oh, geez," I said, I'm really sorry. I just, you know," he said, "Don't worry, I know how it is." He said, "If there was anybody else stood in here at the time, he'd say, we went back a long time." And I thought, "Oh, you're a cool dude. That's really good. I like that." He's a good bloke.
What advice would you give, or do you have any advice for young people who are interested in working in the film and TV industry now? Is that something that you give any thought to, or does it seem so much harder or maybe even so much easier than when you got into it?
It's so much harder, without a doubt, because it's such a closed shop. And it's one thing about our industry, and I'm going to say it and call it as it is. I think it's like a bottleneck, okay? So once you're in, and you can stay there for life. But to try and get in through that little narrow skinny top of the bottle, it's just very difficult, and it seems so much easier if you know somebody. And it's almost like for kids coming out of college. Now, my daughter is over in college in Galway studying this very thing. She wants to get into the industry, and of course I'll help her any way I can, but it's almost like there's a stamp on a lot of people coming out of college. I hear it all the time in the industry, and I really hate it. They're fresh out of college. And as I was saying earlier, some of the best and most talented people I've worked with coming up through the ranks are fresh out of college because they have fresh ideas. They're thinking outside the box. They haven't been schooled yet in terms of the industry, So what I will tell everybody now, unfortunately, this is a bit of a problem as well. I think, again, this is since the pandemic days. A lot of people coming into the industry now, they want to be a cameraman or a director next week. They don't want to start like I did with the production company I mentioned. I was tidying cables when we were out on shoot and making tea as well. I was doing all of that. Before I even got let near a camera. So you have to, I don't want to say start at the bottom and work your way up, but maybe as I do, because it is a true saying. You have to be prepared not to just go straight in at a level where you think you're going to stay at for the rest of your life. Indeed, I've encouraged my daughter to do this as well. She's wanted to be an editor since she was 14 or 15, and she's been editing all of her stuff on her phone. She's thought, "I'd love to be an editor in television, like the same industry as Dad." So, says I, go to college, learn a little bit about every single part of the industry before you sit in a box for the rest of your life editing everybody else's footage. And already that's really opened her eyes. She wants to be shooting her own stuff now, which is great. So I think, again, to keep it short and concise, if I was to talk to anybody new coming into the industry, try a little bit of everything. I think that is the future of the industry. People like me specialising in one skill, a cameraman, I think we're going to be very few and far between in the next 5 or 10 years. The industry is going to thrive again only with people who can do a multitude of skills. And so that's what I would advise anybody. Just learn a little bit of everything. But more importantly, learn a little bit of everybody else's crafts. See what they're up against. I love sitting if I've been shooting a documentary and if I've been DOPing it, and I have to say on the look of it, I love sitting in the edit suite to see exactly what the editor is thinking when they're looking at the footage that I've really slaved over working to bring these incredible looking pictures into the edit suite, because I've seen some of my pictures over the years getting butchered, and that's one of the downsides of my job. In fact, if the truth be known, with television documentaries, I try not to watch a lot of them, because the trap you can fall into is when you've really put your balls into providing the best possible pictures you can provide, and then you see the show going out and they didn't use that shot, and they didn't do this, and they didn't do that. And the trap you can fall into is, the next time you're out for that same show, well, why should I climb to the top of that hill? I did that the last time. They didn't use it. What's the point? They won't use it. It's a very dangerous trap to fall into. So that's why I don't watch a lot of shows that I do.
Has that ever driven you to think, maybe I'd like to be one calling the shots, I'd like to maybe direct something?
Yeah, and I have done. I've done that as well. In fact, I worked on a show many years ago where I was just the director. Somebody else was given the task of cameraman, and it drove me crazy. Talk about being a control freak. I never knew this. I never knew this before this. It was a 2-week shoot, and I had to go to the production company and say, listen, I said, I'm not able to do this. I said, as well as calling the shots, I need to be filming the shots as well. So then I ended up shooting and directing the rest of the series. And I never knew that about myself until I was put into that position. I really surprised myself.
Yeah. Okay, I want to jump across and talk a little bit about the videos that you make on Wheelie Good TV, or for Wheelie Good TV. In a video that you published on the 19th of August in 2020, so way back in the early days of the channel, you outlined your preferences when capturing video, specifically your preference for a filmic look. You talked about shooting in 25p as a frame rate. Have you changed your thoughts about that in any way? And if you have, why?
I haven't necessarily changed my thoughts, but what I have done, and I'm constantly doing this, is I'm changing frame rates. I'm always experimenting with different speeds, different shutter rates, different ISOs. And it's only because the technology keeps evolving. The technology which is coming out every 3 or 4, 6 months, whatever, it's got something else you can manipulate or tweak on it. Recently I've went totally against everything I've ever said, and I've been shooting in 60 frames per second.
I noticed, Dave.
Yeah, but I've changed again. I've gone back. I'm back to 50 frames at the minute. But watch this space. I just. That's the beauty about it, isn't it? As technology evolves, isn't it great to embrace it rather than saying this has to be the way it is going to be for the future, and that's it. I mean, that's one quality I think that I have, and when it comes to camera side of things and with the YouTube stuff, I'm never afraid to try something or try out all of the new bits and pieces and tweaks and twerks that the latest tech has, and I love playing with all of that. So at the moment, in case anybody's listening to this and is wondering, but what's he using at the minute I'm shooting everything in 4K at 50 frames per second. I'm back to 50 because I thought 60 just looked a little bit too video. And back to your original question there, with 50, it still looks filmic because it's progressive. It's not interlaced as in the old days. So it still has that little glitch, which does make it look more filmic at 50. And of course, if people are wondering why I'm shooting at 50 or 60 and not 25 or 30, it's because you have the luxury, without doing anything, you have the luxury of slowing it down to half speed at 25.
And your what's the word? Your timeline. You're editing in 50 as well. Are you or you? Yeah. Okay. So you're keeping it 50 all the way through. Okay.
At the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So now another reason I'm doing this as well. It doesn't matter so much when everything is online. When everything in the television side of things, I used to work in when it was on tape. So it was then called linear. The difference was PAL and NTSC. And you had to shoot PAL. It was all to do with electrical frequency. And even now, in today's latest modern action cameras, it's not called PAL or NTSC anymore. It's called electrical frequency, 50 or 60 hertz. And it's the same as PAL or NTSC. So you will see a glitch if you're shooting in 60. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Europe, indeed, you'll still see a glitch. And of course, when you're filming indoors, where you have, as a lot of YouTubers make this mistake when they're inside their garage showing their motorbikes, and the strip lights on the ceiling of their garage are there and they're on camera, they'll always strobe. And that's because of that electrical frequency. So if you shoot in 25 or 50, if you're in the UK or Europe, and you'll see much less of a strobe.
Yeah.
Top tip there. Top tip.
Yes, indeed. Modern technology has lowered the barrier for many amateurs and hobbyists to get into making film content, whether it's short form for social media or longer form for, say, YouTube. What mistakes do you often see amateurs or hobbyists making that could be easily corrected, whether in the capture or in the editing and the post-production?
I think the first mistake a lot of people make, and I might have already mentioned this, is they keep the camera running for everything. And you can tell, I can tell when people have just become lazy in the edit, rather than honing in on a really good point or a really good visual. And again, this is when I know the roads that they've been riding on, and I know, well, they've just ridden past that bloody amazing sculpture on the road there. Why didn't they mention that? So I can spot when people have become lazy in the edit straight away. That's one of the mistakes. But the biggest one for me, and you'll relate to this, is audio. Now, we're really spoiled these days because from DJI, with all of this wireless mic stuff, and now we can put wireless mics inside of our helmets, and it seems to become a thing of influencers and social media types recently, where they're holding the little wireless mics. Now that does my head in. I will never do that as long as I live. Okay, watch this space. So it just drives me insane. But isn't it amazing that we have the technology to do that? We're not having to clip people up. So what I'm saying, the reason I'm saying this is that there's no excuses for bad audio, especially YouTubers talking wonderful content, wonderful, informative, valuable content in their garage, but they're off mic because they're still speaking to the mic on top of their little action camera. And I can't watch this stuff because of the audio. I just have to turn it off.
Yeah. It's something that I remember we used to watch a lot of films. We were living in China, and we used to get these DVDs off the street corners. Everyone did in those days, so don't come at me, everyone. And they'd be often filmed. If the film had come out recently, it would be a DVD of a film that had been shot in the cinema. And of course, the sound would be terrible, and the picture would be quite dim and dark. But what you notice is, if the sound was half decent, you could watch it. If the sound was terrible and the picture was terrible, forget about it. But the sound, if the sound is good, you can tolerate bad images if the sound is good. But if the sound is bad and the image is bad, just forget it in the trash. Yeah. So that's where I sort of picked up on that. And sound seems to be a challenge for a lot of people because they don't understand how sound works, and that you do need to have microphones close to voices. You need to do things to minimize the impact of the room that you're in. I mean, you can see me, people can't see, but I've got a big duvet sitting up behind me to try and stop reflections. And it makes a difference.
Yeah. It really does. And again, because of the advent of all of this latest wireless technology, you don't have to set everything up and start tweaking levels and introducing bass cut. I mean, straight out of the box, you can get much better sound from these wireless mics than you ever would from using the top mic built into your action camera, especially when people are out on the side of a road on a windy day. I mean, you only have to look at YouTube now to look at the quality of what's coming through. And again, and I don't want to put people's raw talent down, but when we've got raw talent mixed with what we've got coming through in terms of tech, there's some amazing, I mean, you can spot some really great people coming through on YouTube at the moment, and just watch this space. In fact, I'm thinking about doing a video just to highlight some of these channels that I'm watching, because you only know that these channels are going to be the channels to be watching in the future, But these people have got the idea of how important sound is over pictures, and it carries it such a long way. And even when, and again, you'll totally relate to this, even when people are trying to make a moment, like a sad moment, slowing that speech down, as long as that speech is clear and the recording of their own sound, and then just introducing the music at a gradual level, rather than having videos, as we saw like 5 years ago, just music videos, people riding motorcycles, no ambient sound, no speech, nothing, just music videos. But their choice, their track that they wanted to listen to over a music video, well, already you're limiting your audience, because not everybody's going to like that track you've chosen. At least if you talk and explain, then I'll hold on to the video a little bit more, but do it with good audio.
Just another question on the filmmaking. For someone who's new to filmmaking, can you explain why a truly sort of professional camera, and I'm thinking something like the Sony FX9, which I think you have, or at least you had the Sony FX9, yeah. Why does that cost so much compared to, say, cameras that are more aimed at the vlogging segment? I'm thinking, for example, the Sony ZV-1 Mark II, which I think has come out quite recently, and it's, much cheaper. What are you getting with the much more expensive camera?
See, I find that fascinating that you've asked this question, because in my world now, I can't believe that the Sony FX9 is so cheap. Because when I was given my contract with the BBC, I had to go out. I've always been freelance. So even though I worked with the BBC for 15 years, I was a freelancer for them, which meant that I had to buy the equipment. So when I went out at 21 years old to buy my first camera with tripod and batteries and all the auxiliary stuff which came with it, it was £70,000 sterling. I didn't even have my own house at 21 years old. I went to the bank as a 21-year-old, right, looking to borrow £70,000 sterling in 1991, and I just got laughed at. And then I showed the bank manager my contract from the BBC, and the money was in the account the following day. So when when you're talking about a Sony FX9, I think I paid. Now I've had that camera. Oh, that's the other thing, by the way. Back in the day, like, a camera would last us 10 years in the television industry. And now, because, again, everything evolving so quick, we're sort of having to change formats every sort of... We're lucky if we get 5 years out of a camera now before we have to change. And talking of which, I've had my Sony FX9 for 4 years. So if I get another year out of it, I'll be lucky. It's an incredible camera. But I think I paid €12,000 for that camera. I couldn't believe how cheap it was. Now, obviously, when you compare it to the action cameras, I mean, it's a totally different league. Everything, all of the gubbins inside it, the processors, of course, it comes down to one thing only, really, which is the image quality. And there's all sorts of things I could go off on in many, many tangents talking about how we bring it all together inside one box, but that's what you're paying for, really. And of course, the name Sony on top of that, which is incredible that Sony has been there since the 70s, still designing the best television cameras that there are. Unfortunately, they couldn't do the same with drones. They dipped their toe into drones to try and compete with DJI back in 2020. What was the name of it? I forget the name of the drone they brought out. So that was a 4-year project for Sony. In fact, they only folded that project last year, realised that they couldn't compete with DJI. So they got out of drones pretty much as quick as they got into it. So that fascinated me, because they know all about camera science. What they didn't know was how to make those cameras fly.
I wasn't aware of that, that they'd actually dipped their toes into drone making.
The whole idea was because of the beautiful little cameras like the A7S III and the FX3, the mirrorless cameras. Sony wanted to make those fly, basically, and
Right.
and they were going to develop that platform to do that, but they didn't. They lost an awful lot of money, very much like GoPro when they tried to make a consumer drone called the Karma to compete with DJI. In fact, that nearly finished GoPro.
I wonder now with the DJI ban in the US whether there are manufacturers looking again at trying to put out a serious competitor, because the DJI has sort of pretty much owned the space for the last 10 years, haven't they? I wonder
That's
if there's
right.
an opportunity now, particularly with the large North American market, or a US market anyway, with the recent announcements about DJI sort of not being given approval to sell new products in the US. I guess we
Yeah,
just have to watch the space.
yeah. I mean, exactly. I'd be very surprised if there wasn't some American companies coming through over the next couple of years trying to develop it. But like DJI are one of the biggest companies in the world now. You know, how do you compete with that? A lot of companies, as you know, have tried and they just never survive. I mean, to keep up with groundbreaking technology speeds in terms of inventing stuff, which DJI are, flying the flag for. Like DJI, don't forget, came out with drones. Now they're in the broadcast industry. They're developing wireless microphones. They're developing these amazing action cameras that we have, and the 360 cameras as well. It wouldn't surprise me if they really moved in to compete with Sony in the broadcast industry, because a lot of us, including myself, I use DJI wireless microphones on all of my documentary work now. And still to this day, in fact, yesterday I was out filming, and the presenter I was filming with, who I hadn't filmed before, he was like, as I was clipping the DJI mic onto him, "What are these?" He said, "Jeepers, these are fantastic. These are great. This is much better than undoing my shirt in the street and having to be wired up and everything. These are brilliant." You know, so I really do think they'll make strides within the broadcast industry. So a little lesser known fact, by the way, for your audience, is that between 2004 and 2007, I was on one of the early internet forums with the owner of DJI. Frank Wang was his name. Well, it still is his name, unless he's changed it. But we were on a forum called runrider.net. It's not there anymore. There was 10 of us on this forum. 10 anoraks. He was one of them. I was one of them. There was a lad from Sweden and a lad from Wales who were all in this little clique on how to make radio-controlled helicopters act as a platform to take up a video camera. And we were bouncing ideas off each other for years and years and years. I sat in my kitchen with a bottle of wine back then, most nights, frustrated as hell as how to make this work and how to get incredible pictures to emulate what a full-size helicopter would do. But even better than that, you'd be able to fly under trees and under bridges and everything. And we all had the same end goal. Now, unfortunately, only one person got there, and he's now a billionaire running £1 billion company. Unfortunately, like we say, they've just been banned in America. But it was unbelievable to think back then. Like he developed, first of all, an autopilot. We all flew radio-controlled helicopters, by the way. Impossible to fly. Oh, nightmare to fly. Forever crashing. In the early days, I had a camera in a Tupperware box, basically gaffer taped onto the front of a radio-controlled helicopter, and the camera inside the box was surrounded by sponge. And but when people saw the images, and we're talking, a VX2000 early high 8, was it high 8 or mini DV camera? I think it was mini DV camera.
Oh, yeah.
When people saw those images, they couldn't believe it because I was flying underneath bridges. So it was what the device could do rather than the quality of the image at this stage, you realize, because it was fraught with vibration. You had vibration from a main rotor, vibration from a tail rotor, and then all sorts of weird and wonderful effects happening within the camera as well. So we were all on this, we were all in search of the Holy Grail, and Mr. Frank Wang, DJI, he got there. But he did, that's what I was going on to. He devised a system in 2008 or something, which was an autopilot. for a radio-controlled helicopter, which basically meant that you could take your thumbs off the sticks when the helicopter was in the air and it would sit there. This was the first time this had ever been done, because if you ever took your hands off the sticks whilst flying a radio-controlled helicopter, it would just veer off to one side and crash, as mine did on a regular basis. In fact, I was the Ryder Cup, the famous golf tournament, came to Ireland in 2006, I believe. It's been here a couple of times since, but I was hired with my 6-foot-long radio-controlled helicopter and Tupperware box. No, I think I developed some sort of gimbal affair at this stage. Anyway, I was shooting all of the promos for Sky Sports, BBC. All of the main broadcasters from America were over, and I had a contract with all of them to shoot all of the promo stuff, the sunrise and over the K Club, which was the golf course in Ireland where the Ryder Cup was being held. I was going to do all this weird and wonderful, incredible stuff that nobody had ever seen before from my radio-controlled helicopter. Day one, 5 o'clock in the morning, just as the sun is rising, I lifted off over the 18th fairway, and I got an engine failure, and it crashed. And not only did it crash, it crashed onto the fairway and left a crater. And bearing in mind the competition was being played in about 1.5 hours' time, it left a crater in the 18th fairway. And I walked away from that job and thought that'll be the last time I ever fly radio-controlled helicopters with a camera on the front of any sorts. And it was. And then in 2013, along came DJI with their first consumer drone, which was the Phantom. So when that came out, I thought, you clever sod, because I knew who it was, of course, because I'd been on the forum with them many years before. So, of course, I went out and bought one, and the rest is history. I still have 3 of his drones in the back of my television crewing van, and I'm using action cameras, I'm using his wireless mics, I'm using his 360 cameras, I'm using pretty much everything they bring out because it's absolutely superb.
And there are rumors that he's going to bring out a mirrorless camera as well. I at least I've seen rumors like that for 12 months. I don't know how much further down the path they are with that, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do that, because, and that, as you talk about, being competition for Sony, then absolutely that would be competition for Sony, because also the DJI stuff tends to be reasonably well priced, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's what I love about the DJI stuff is that it is aimed at the consumer. Now, if he brings out a mirrorless camera, and that's what I was touching on actually before, when all the indicators are that he will move into the broadcast world. If he comes in with broadcast prices, it's going to be a tough market to crack. But if he comes in with prices like he's kept at the moment, where it's within reach. For a hobbyist or a professional alike, you can nearly think with an action camera, do you know what, if it falls off the bike, like, you can afford to go and buy another. You can't when it's a Sony FX3 or an FX6 or an FX9. You can't be thinking like that. And that, still to this day, is how I get some of the shots I get in my broadcast work. When you're prepared to lose a camera for the sake of your art, then more often than not, you'll get that shot. But I wouldn't risk my FX9 in some of the places that I stick an Osmo Action 6,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very interested to see what's coming down the line from DJI and other manufacturers, of course. I must say as well, I'm not affiliated in any way, form, or any way else with DJI. I've just told you the story of how I knew him online. He wouldn't remember me, of course, and there are countless times I've written to DJI's press department to say, listen to this story. I've even made a video about it. I said, here's the link, watch this story. Please, can I have some sort of affiliate link, because I've sold hundreds of cameras at this stage through my YouTube channel, just talking about how good they are. Now, at the same time, I'll also call them out with that Osmo 360 when they released that last year, and I went out and bought one of them. And there was mist on the center of the lens, they've had a problem as well. Certainly when you're on a motorbike, getting the level of the audio. What they need is somebody who does a lot of motorcycle vlogging, i.e. me, to, to tell them what's required in terms of recording audio on motorcycles, because it's still a bit of a problem. That I found a workaround. It's not ideal, but I found a workaround which makes it broadcast worthy in my head. But it's still not perfect, but hey, that's why things keep developing and evolving, isn't it? What is perfect, Then the next camera will be perfect.
Right. But then you won't have a reason to buy the next one after that. Okay.
Exactly.
Enough. I want to ask a few questions about the YouTube content creation that you've done. And look, I went back and watched some of your early work. And that's one thing I like to do, because that's the great thing about YouTube is you can go back and look at someone's work from 5 years ago to what they put out last week. And I thought it was
quite an awful lot into this.
Well, I enjoy it. I went back and looked at the very first video that you published to YouTube, which would have been in sort of mid-2020, I think. I don't know if it's the first you've ever put to YouTube, but in terms of Wheelie Good TV, it's the first video that's currently shown as being published there. And that was your Yamaha FJR 1300, 1 month of ownership, the only review you need. Love your titling.
It's still one of the most watched videos I've ever had, by the way.
Yes. Now, the thing that I found that was quite interesting is that you obviously put so much time into that. I mean, it's very cinematic. It doesn't just use the 16:9 sort of widescreen. It used sort of the cinematic widescreen, the super widescreen.
I think I put the anamorphic bars on that.
Yeah, exactly. You did a ton of shot coverage. All sorts of different fancy setups and taking of pictures, drone, everything. Clearly, it was a major production. And while I haven't watched everything, I have to be honest and say I have not watched everything on your channel, Dave. I mean, it's approaching 400 videos, I think, now, isn't it?
It must be, yeah.
One thing that surprised me is that I found that video, that very first video, is actually not really representative of the entire channel. Like, I don't know if you've ever done anything else like that ever since. And now, having not watched everything,
are you saying it's gone downhill since?
Those are your words, Dave. But
I know where you're coming from, by the way.
Can you tell me, you've gone on a bit of a journey, because actually not the last one that published, but the previous one, which was this blooper reel, which looks like it had been shot in 60 frames per second. By the way, it's hilarious. It's basically you driving down a motorway in Spain. You've obviously, you sort of got off on the wrong side of the bed and you're just having a grumpy day and you're sweating. It's hilarious. I recommend everyone, if you're not upset with a bit of swearing, it's hilarious to watch it because there's something so brutally honest about it. Now, I'm not saying that very first video wasn't brutally honest, but I'm really interested in how you've gone from something that obviously took a lot of work to something that is produced more recently very efficiently. And maybe can you just talk through that progression, change, whatever? Yeah.
I know exactly what you're getting at here. So going back to that video, the first ever one, of course, with my TV background, when I'd made the decision that I was going to try out a little bit of YouTube, because I was getting back into motorcycles then. That's what spurred me to start the YouTube channel. I hadn't been on a bike in 30 odd years. And again, it was the pandemic which made me think, once this thing is over, I need to get a motorbike. I need to get out in the fresh air. I need to, I need to escape. So that's what got me back into it. And I thought, why don't I chart my return to motorcycling? And I'd always quite fancied, because I, like yourself, I watch an awful lot of YouTube. I'd always quite fancied the idea of a YouTube channel. But at the time, doing what I'm doing for a living, there was a lot of experts doing that. And I thought, I can't be bothered, So I thought, yeah, we'll chart my return to motorcycling. So that's where that came from. And then, of course, I was, with my first video, because I didn't know any better, I was going to put whatever it took to try and make it look like one of my TV documentaries. I was going to throw the kitchen sink at it, as you say. I did. I had the drones, the 360s, 3 or 4 different action cams on the bike. I was doing all sorts of fancy and wonderful sound mixes. It was pretty much scripted as well. From what I remember, I don't think there was anything natural about that video. I scripted it and storyboarded it pretty much like I would with a TV show. Now, here I am eating my words because I actually didn't like that style. I now don't like that style of YouTube video. But I'm eating my words because it's still one of the most watched videos that I've ever made in 6 years now. So maybe I'll have to look at returning to that style of making YouTube videos. But you can imagine the amount of time that took. That wasn't just filmed for instance, that wasn't just filmed over one ride out. I think that was filmed over 3 or 4 different ride outs. Then there was the editing, then there was the color grading. Then there was the sound mixing. I think all in all, if I'd got that one video done in less than a week, I would have been doing well. And YouTube doesn't pay. And I realised after that, I can't be doing this, until the channel is huge and I'm making millions from YouTube. Little did I know then. And so I very quickly realised that you can't be devoting that amount of time or effort or energy into something which I'm not getting paid for when I'm a freelancer and time is money. So it was lovely to have done that and to see how it works, and that very much got me into it. But back to what you were saying, the blooper reel, the recent one, I wasn't going to be putting that one out either. I have to be honest, it was only when I got home, and I'll always use my eldest son. He's 22 years old, and I'll always use him to gauge my videos if I'm stuck as to whether I should or shouldn't be putting this out. Is it a bit much, a bit too rude, a bit too crass? And he said, Dad, you've got to put that out. He said, somebody's going to get a great laugh out of that. He said, not everybody, but he said, somebody's going to get a great laugh out of that. And I think you just touched on it there. What is good about that reel is that it is me. It's what happened inside my head on that day, what I say to myself on a constant basis, and I verbalize it. For some reason, when I'm wearing a helmet, I speak out loud. It's really strange. I don't just think things. I speak out loud when I'm wearing the helmet. And I think within that video, you saw another motorcyclist come alongside me at the traffic lights. And it was only at that moment I realized I was talking out loud, so that I had to shut up again, So with things like that, I think it's a good laugh just for people really to say. It's very tongue-in-cheek, if people want to get a laugh by seeing the struggles that we, and I say we as vloggers, go through, because so many people have said to me after seeing that, oh my God, this is just me. This is me on a regular basis. That's exactly what I go through, the turmoil we go through trying to think of what to say, not getting our words out right. And I mean, when I go to the ABR festival, I don't know if you're familiar with that, the Adventure Bike Rider Festival, the big festival every summer in the UK, people would often come up and say, oh, can we get more blooper reels? Well, no, because I don't produce them. I don't script them. They only happen by default. They're only my mistakes. They're the real mistakes. So I can't predict how many I'm going to do. I might get none next year, because that means I've become better as a vlogger. If you get loads of blooper reels next year, it means I'm still crap.
You mentioned ABR there, and I know that you're making an appearance at the ABR this year, aren't you?
Yeah. First time ever.
First time?
Yeah, really looking forward to that.
Are you allowed to tell us in any way, to any detail, less or greater, what you've been asked to do or what you're planning to do?
Yeah, very much like your podcast here. Because of my background in TV and film, it'll be mainly about how to film your ride, the best possible way to film your ride. And I'll be touching on a lot of the things we've just spoken about, what you don't need to film. But I'll be talking about workflow as well, and how basically from script to screen, or from storyboard to screen, blank canvas sort of thing. Like, I've only got 45 minutes to speak there. How on earth am I going to cram all that into 45 minutes? And then there's a 15-minute Q&A. So I'm very much looking forward to the Q&A in the hope that I can directly answer people's questions. But it'll be along the lines of that, yeah. What I use cameras wise, where I mount them, how I come up with the idea, and a little bit about the editing and the sound and the drones as well. Basically, bringing all of the toys into back to the desk in the edit suite, and I'll try and cover all of that in 45 minutes. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that sounds tough. Yeah, having done a little bit of that kind of thing a couple of years ago, found that I desperately ran out of time. It was very frustrating.
Yeah. Actually, on the back of that, I have thought about this. I'd love to share that knowledge. So what I am currently in the process of doing, and I hope you don't mind me saying this on your podcast, Simon, is that I'm doing some online, like a film academy, some online courses, and I've been busy over the Christmas period recording them. They'll all be launched at some stage this year on my website, which hasn't even been launched yet. So when the website is launched, they'll be launched. But we're well on the way doing like a film school, just for people who don't know whether to shoot in 50 or 60 or 25 or 30 and what size lenses and what level the audio should be at and all of that sort of stuff. So within the film school, I'll be covering everything. So I just sort of want to touch on this at the ABR. Well, I presume that's why they've got me there anyway. So they sent me the press photograph last week by email, and it says something along the lines of "come and see adventurer and YouTube star," of which I'm neither in my head, because compared to some of the lads, adventurer, like I'm not worthy to be on the same stage as some of the people who are there. Now I know a lot about cameras and I know a lot about that side of things. So I'm sure we'll see how it goes. It'll be great crack, so to say, in Ireland.
Yeah, I think that talk will be extremely well attended. I'm sure, because there's such an appetite for finding out this stuff, I believe.
This is exactly it. And I think, like nearly everybody who watches a bit of YouTube and who owns a motorcycle, it's very easy now for people to go out and buy an action camera if all they ever do is watch it back themselves on the television. But to film your own ride is a thing a lot of us motorcyclists are doing now. Like I say, even if it's just for yourself with no intention of ever putting it out on the social media or YouTube or anything like that. But even if that's you and you just want to film your own ride to watch back on your television, hopefully those people sitting in the tent will get enough pointers as to how best to do that and how to make it look the best you can possibly make it look.
I want to just ask a question about motovlogging. Did you realize when you started that it was because I believe motovlogging is quite personality driven, at least to build an audience, regardless of size, but a loyal audience around what you're doing. I think it's very much personality driven. Were you aware of that before you started the channel?
Yes, I was, but for all the wrong reasons. So I don't know how many of my earlier videos you watched, but I made the fatal mistake of thinking I had to present. So my first 10 videos, around about that, I think I presented and I can barely watch them back. And I know when I was editing them, I thought, I'm not really into this. I knew how uncomfortable I was when I was editing it, how uncomfortable I was feeling at the time when I was walking around the motorbike and talking about the bike, having this and having that and everything. And I was just thinking, this is just isn't me. And of those first 10 videos, I threw another 10 away, which never saw the light of day, because I was just so uncomfortable with the whole thing. And I took a bit of a break after that, just to basically evaluate whether I was going to proceed with the YouTube thing or not. And it was my wife. My wife said, "Yeah, but Dave, it's not you, And at this stage, I'd made contact with some of the, as I call them, the big boys, Bruce, who you know very well, Andy, the Missing Flyer, Richie, Vida. I'd made contact with those boys, and I'd come up on their radar anyway because of the way I was filming stuff. So they sort of knew of me, and they were very kind to give me pointers and invaluable advice, which I still hold on to these days. And all three of those boys said, "Yes, stop presenting, stop presenting like you're not a presenter, stop presenting, be yourself." And it's true, the audience sees through that. So I thought, well, I'll give it one more go. I was fit to pack it in after doing the first 10 videos, if I'm totally honest. And I got the kick I wanted out of it. And I got something put on YouTube, which will be up there for my kids to see and their kids to see in years to come, hopefully, if somebody doesn't press that big magic YouTube button to off. It'll always be there. And that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to do it, like a sort of video diary of me, where I was at that stage in my life, 50 years old, riding around on motorbikes. In fact, that was probably the main reason I wanted to do the YouTube thing at the time. But when those boys said, yeah, just be yourself, and then my wife said, give it another go, but stop the presenting lark, that's when I thought, wow, and I'm enjoying it so much more, and it's so much more natural, and I can actually bear to sit in the edit and cut myself together, because it's not as painful watching myself back, because I know when I was saying that, I actually meant it, I felt it, and I was saying the truth as to exactly what my feelings were at the time. So here I am, still doing that. I hope I come across as sincere and true. And I've always, on that note, actually, I've always said when I'm reviewing stuff as well, whatever you send me to review, and I'll tell every company this. Sounds like I get a lot of stuff. I don't really. But anybody who sends me stuff, I'll always say, listen, whether I like it or not, I'm going to say it. And in fact, I don't mind saying this because I've said it publicly a few times. The camera company Insta360, they sent me one of their 360 cameras, the X3. And I took it off on holiday one year, a couple of years ago, to Spain, and made the review on holiday. And I had a little WhatsApp group with their engineers at the time, so I could report back my findings. And I called them out on something, and they didn't like it. So I put it out because I told them, I said, I'm going to say it how it is. And I have, as you can imagine, all of the scopes for tuning cameras in and everything. I have analog scopes here with digital inputs, like the old-fashioned stuff, just to really set your camera up well with digital inputs from engineers that I've sourced across the world. So I know when I plug stuff into this stuff, there's not going to be an app you can buy for your Mac to tell you that the colors are correct in this camera, which are as good as my old analog scopes. So when I started running the tests of this camera, and nothing added up as what they were saying it was going to be within all of their marketing blurb. So when I called them out on it, and they were denying it, I said, right, okay, time to go to town. I'm going to tell people my findings, and this is what I think. Now, of course, everything's been fixed in future firmware upgrades and everything, but I often wonder, was it only fixed because I called it out? The power of YouTube and the power of the internet is great in so many ways. If you start spouting off about something, things will get addressed and fixed. Unfortunately, that's one of the biggest downfalls. Again, I don't want to start company bashing here because I've done it enough on my YouTube channel about GoPro, because that's one of their biggest downfalls. They never listened to customer feedback, and that's why they're now at the bottom of the pile in terms of the action camera market. Now, at the same time, we wouldn't be where we are in the world of action cameras without GoPro, so that's why I can't totally criticize them. But, I started using GoPro cameras in my broadcast world when the BBC said there's no way we can allow cameras of that inferior quality onto our programs. And I said, yeah, but wait and see what they can do. Let's have a look at this, let's have a look at that. I shot a feature film back in the mid 2013 for I'm saying a feature film for cinema screens. So you can imagine the quality really has to be there to be blown up onto cinema screens. Took us 5 years to shoot that, and it was all. I won't go into what the whole film was about. It was called The Man Who Wanted to Fly, and. I had GoPros all over the aeroplane, of course, which was a microlight, on a regular basis. And the amount of times those GoPros were failing, and even though they were telling you they were recording, and I just lost so much footage. I won't go into some of the TV documentaries where I introduced GoPro into that world as well. And we lost so much footage. Every time I contacted GoPro, all I got back was a copy and paste email. Did you format your cards? Did you charge your battery? I mean, come on, lads, come on. Now, when I've had the same concerns over the last year with DJI cameras, like the mist and the 360 lens fogging up, a couple of audio issues. In fact, even with their Osmo Action 6, their latest camera, I had big problems with the audio setup and that, and I started spouting off. Unfortunately, that's one of my bad traits. I spout off first, and then calm down afterwards. And I use my YouTube channel as a voice for that. But DJI were all over that in fairness, and they got back to me straight away to say, have you done this? Have you done that? Try this, try that. Go off and do all of this. And at our end, we'll look into it and we'll try this and try that. And it's just about fixed. It's not 100%, but it's just about fixed. But they listen. DJI listen. That's what I'm saying. GoPro don't. So sorry if I'm company bashing here. I'm just saying it how it is. So, and I'm not affiliated with any one company, just to set the record straight there.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, I do have a couple of last questions.
Come on.
First of all, with regards to your own filmmaking, who have you taken inspiration from, or maybe who would you recommend others to watch?
Is that with motorcycles or just generally?
I'd like to say to my guests just generally, because I think sometimes there's a danger that if you're making films about motorcycling, you only watch or take inspiration from other motorcycling films. I kind of like the idea myself that actually you should be watching a whole range of different types of things to get your inspiration, actually.
Well, that's very true. And like I've touched on a few times in this podcast, you never stop learning. Certainly when you're in this business. If you're prepared to accept that, and it's a mind game in many ways, if you're prepared to never fall into the trap of thinking you know it all, even with the amount of experience that I have, and you're prepared to learn, and you're prepared, when you put a video out about a camera fogging up and allow somebody to say in your YouTube comments, yeah, but have you tried this? If you're prepared to go off and try it without thinking, who are you to tell me with 37 years experience how to set this up? And then you find out, oh, Jesus, yeah, he was right. So if you're prepared to accept that, then you're going to carry on learning and get the best out of the business. I think, come back to your question, early on, as a young TV cameraman wanting to maybe break out of the news regime and get into documentaries and feature films, Ridley Scott, the director, I just thought was ahead of his time. He's also a fellow Geordie from South Shields, no less. And but when he did Alien, now bearing in mind, like, he had very limited special effects, very limited camera trickery, green screen stuff, you know. I mean, he of course then went on to do Gladiator as well. Imagine shooting scenes that big with the resources in terms of technology, which was non-existent, really. It was just massive. I know they had massive budgets and massive money, but I had to admire Ridley Scott and think, how does he do all of that? A lot of people might say, yeah, because he had millions. But to put on big scale productions like that and thinking outside the box, I thought Ridley Scott, even to this day, as a director, I've always admired. But then at the same time, 1977, I think, was the first time I ever went to the cinema with the school. That was to see a film called Kess. Ken Loach was the director of that, and it was set in Sheffield. And that was just reality. And I've still to this day, when people say, what's your favorite film? Kess has to be up there, because it wouldn't be a million miles from where I grew up from, you know, and just that raw, grim way of how he portrayed that young lad. The only thing he had in his life, his escape, if you like, was his Kestrel. One of the cameramen who trained me said, Dave, general rule of thumb, when you're training as a cameraman here, as you are, he said, just imagine the audience sat at home in the front rooms watching your pictures on their television with no sound. If you're able to make them understand what the news story is about with no sound and no commentary, he said, you're going to do well. And I've never forgotten that. Even to this day, when I'm filming something, I'll always try and tell the story through pictures. And I'll remember the name, God rest him, Bob Armstrong was his name. And I'll never forget that. So in terms of cameramen, I don't know if you saw the film 1917 by the wonderful Sir Roger Deakins, who was the DOP on that.
Yeah.
Again, with all of his expertise, experience, talent, to even on a film like 1917 still push the boundaries with that opening shot. I think it was 10 minutes unedited.
Yeah.
To be doing something like that when he doesn't need to, He doesn't need to do that. But he did it. And that was one continuous shot. It blew me away, that. It really blew me away. In fact, he has a podcast as well. I've been listening to that over Christmas. So they continue to inspire me, those people I've just mentioned. But like yourself, I'm a huge person for watching a lot of YouTube. And again, I've said it, you can see the young, the raw talent coming through on YouTube. Just if you have a spare night one night and you don't know what to watch on the telly, or you're holed up in a hotel room, I would often do this and just put in short films, new short films on the YouTube search and see what's just coming through and spot talent. And in fact, I would always sell my cameras that I don't need anymore on eBay or the likes of, And I sold a Panasonic GH5 mirrorless type of affair before I got into the Sony A7S III as my B camera for my FX9. So 4 or 5 years ago, I sold a camera to a young chap in England through eBay. And our conversation started. Obviously, he wanted to make sure he was buying from a genuine person, whatever. And I said, listen, this is who I am. Check out my website. I'm real. I'm not going to fleece you. This is some of the stuff. And I sent links to some of the stuff I'd recorded with the camera. Anyway, the transaction happened. And then he started sending me stuff months afterwards of stuff he'd filmed. And again, why have we mentioned the pandemic so many times within the course of this podcast? But that's when it was. And he reviewed his car, sat on his driveway during the pandemic, using the camera that he bought from me on eBay. And I was blown away. I just thought this kid's got serious talent. And now he's working with the BBC. How weird is that?
Lovely.
He's now working with the BBC. He got a work experience week on Top Gear, no less. Obviously, somebody spotted his talent in there, and he's off working for the BBC full time. I'm still in touch through social media and everything. But I knew when he sent me the stuff through after having the camera for a month after buying it from me, I knew this kid had talent. And that's what I say about YouTube. So I'm always inspired by people who think outside the box, people who push the boundaries, even like Sir Roger Deakins. But, new people coming through. And just, that's another beautiful thing about our business. There are no rules. And I love that. Our TV industry is not a format. In fact, it's anything but. You'll always do well if you try and break the format and think outside the box. Try something new. Never be afraid of trying something new. And that goes right back to the YouTube stuff as well. Like, so what if somebody doesn't like it? There's always somebody who will. Never be afraid of trying something different, something new.
Okay, Dave, last question. Simple question. Does the filming enhance or diminish the pleasure of a motorcycle ride for you?
Oh, wow. Honest answer, there are days where I've set aside to go off filming and I wake up like I did in Spain that day a few weeks ago on my blooper reel, and I wake up and I just know today is not going to work for filming. So when I go out on a bike and I'm not really in the mood for it, I'll know within half an hour that I'm just not going to get the best video and the cameras will actually go back in the bag. So fortunately, I'm able to recognize that, and I'll know that that day isn't going to be a good day for filming, but it's going to be a wonderful day for motorcycle riding. So I'll enjoy the day for what it is, and there'll always be another day for putting a video together in my eyes. But that moment for escapism and getting out of it and just pressing the reset button, which is what motorcycling does for me, that's so much more important than making a film out of where I'm going that day. So that will always prevail over making a YouTube video. If I need that escapism, which motorcycling offers me, that's always going to win out.
Thanks so much for being my guest for this episode, Dave. Now's your chance to tell folk where they can find and follow you online.
Yeah, and lovely to talk to you as well, Simon. I thoroughly enjoyed that. So as my wife keeps telling me, yeah, but you always love talking about yourself, so of course you're going to be fine doing that. So thank you very much for those of you who did make it to the end. Sorry if I did waffle a little bit too much. If you do want to follow me and you're not already following me, I'm on YouTube at Wheelie Good TV. I'm also very active on Instagram, again at Wheelie Good TV. And if you want to see behind the scenes as well, and I hate doing this, but if you do want to see behind the scenes and you want technical advice and knowledge and you want access to my experience, you can catch me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Wheelie Good TV. Oh, and on top of that, I will have a website launched very, very soon. But I'm not even going to tell you the name of the website yet because it's not up there yet.
Great. And let me know, because I'll also push out the information about the website once you know what it is. But look, thanks again for being here today. Take care and ride safe.
Absolute pleasure, Simon. Thanks for having me on.